Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 27th, 2022, man, it's coming fast, Planning Commission meeting. This is a special meeting and is being conducted utilizing teleconference and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order number 2920, dated March 17th, 2020. We're conducting the meeting using the Zoom platform and streaming it live on the city website and broadcasting on Comcast Channel 15, as well as via the city YouTube channel. Public members had the opportunity to submit emails to city staff. A report of all written comments was distributed to Planning Commission members via email and posted to the city's website under, quote, documents received after published agenda, close quote. Ms. Denise Chan, would you please take roll call?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Good evening, present.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Present, thank you.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Present.
Commissioner Lowe.
Here.
Commissioner Roche.
Here, and welcome to our new chair, our Chair Kenda.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Chair Okenda.
Present.
Thank you. Have a good meeting.
Thank you very much. So we can jump right on in to Yes, we will open public comment. I'm correct. We're jumping right in there. And I got to read something, I think, before. So let me go ahead and do that. The public comment section provides an opportunity to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda. The Planning Commission welcomes your comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner. Speakers wishing to address the Planning Commission should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Now I will ask Denise Chan to moderate the public comment portion of the meeting. And at the end of the public comment, we will address any questions that come up. Ms. Denise Chan.
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to speak and you are using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you are dialing in, press star 9. If you're dialing in, press star 9 to raise your hand on the phone and use star 6 to unmute yourself when called to speak. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your audio will be disabled. All right, Chair, we have 4 attendees, but so far no one has raised their hand.
All right. If anybody wants to speak on an item not on the agenda, now's your chance. And once, go and
click the raise hand button.
That's right. Raise your hand if you want to speak on public comment. All right. If there's still nobody, I'm assuming that people want to speak on the agenda item, so we can close public comment and move on to the first agenda item. Yay. All right. So the first agenda item for the Planning Commission is final unless appealed. We have a proposed cannabis cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution facility located at 2459 Radley Court, requiring approval of conditional use permit and an administrative use permit. Application number 202-101-300. And we have Alberto Giannacini, Mihosa, doing business as G3 Consumables is the applicant, with Giannacini Holdings as the owner. And with that, we can hear from city staff, please.
Great. Thank you, Chair. And good evening, Commissioners. Elizabeth Blanton, Senior Planner. For this item tonight, let me share my screen. One moment. Full screen. Here we go. And are we now seeing full screen of the presentation?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I've gotten that backwards in the past, so just want to make sure you're not on presentation view. So for this item this evening, we'll be reviewing a conditional use permit and administrative use permit application for Mihosa to allow a cannabis facility with cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution activities. As you'll recall, this past summer, the City Council approved an updated and streamlined process for reviewing cannabis applications. Now, since Mahosa originally submitted their application back in 2018, their application has been processed through our previous cannabis process, not the new streamlined process. So as a result, their commercial cannabis permits were approved by the City Council back in 2018 and 2019, and tonight they're seeking approval of their land use entitlement application. So the proposed project is located at the end of Radley Court, which is indicated by the red star on this map. And as you can see, the project site is on the western edge of the industrial area, just east of the Hayward shoreline. The proposed business will operate out of an existing industrial building on a site that is just over 1 acre in size. The general plan land use designation of the site is industrial corridor, and the zoning district is industrial park. Now, cannabis businesses with cultivation and manufacturing activities in a space that's over 5,000 square feet in size, like this one proposes, are allowed in the IP zoning district with the approval of a conditional use permit. Additionally, cannabis distribution businesses are allowed with the approval of an administrative use permit. So since this facility will have all of those activities, cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution, approval of both a conditional use permit and an administrative use permit is required. The existing structure is a simple industrial building with its primary entrance facing a small on-site parking lot. No changes to the exterior are proposed as part of this application other than some simple security upgrades. And as you can see here, the area immediately surrounding the project site features very similar industrial buildings that house a range of uses, including warehousing, manufacturing, distribution, and storage, among others. The plans for this application are included in attachment 4 to this agenda item. So in the site plan here, we can see the existing approximately 29,000 square foot building in gray, as well as that existing parking and some paved open spaces that surround the building. Looking inside, the proposed floor plan includes a series of vegetation, grow, trimming, and drying rooms, a research and development area, secure storage spaces, and a variety of offices and break rooms. And additionally, I'll quickly highlight here the secure check-in room that any visitors to the site will be screened in prior to having access to the full facility, and the shipping and receiving area that will allow entire vehicles with cannabis product in them to be secured inside of the enclosed building while loading and unloading. The business plan and operations summary for Mahosa is included as attachment 5 to this agenda item. And as mentioned earlier, the proposed facility will have 3 components: cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. So the cultivation process involves several steps, including vegging from seed, cloning, potting, flowering, and harvesting. And then in this case, the manufacturing process merely involves taking the flowers that are harvested from the cultivation process and drying, trimming, and packaging them. Unlike some other cannabis manufacturing facilities that have been approved in the city, no extraction is proposed to occur at this facility. The distribution component of the business will then take that packaged cannabis flower material for bulk sale and for cannabis pre-rolls and distribute that to other licensed cannabis operators. The facility does not have a retail or delivery component, so no sales will be made directly to consumers, but rather just to other licensed cannabis operators. Mahosa's cultivation and manufacturing components will be operational around the clock with some automated processes, but the majority of the quote-unquote human input, when people will be in the building working there, will largely occur between the business hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Additionally, the distribution component of the business, which will involve some bulk deliveries to and from the site, will only operate on weekdays, and again, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Mahosa's security plan has been provided as attachment 6 to this staff report. To comply with both city and state requirements, the facility will have at least 1 on-site security guard at all times during business hours. Mahosa will also install security cameras inside and outside of the buildings, as well as a new alarm system. The security footage will be high definition and will be available to the police department whenever they request it. And as I mentioned earlier, visitors to the site will enter through that controlled check-in station, and vehicles will be loaded and unloaded in a secure loading area. Attachment 7 contains MHOSA's environmental plan. As conditioned, MHOSA, like all other cannabis businesses, will be required to provide a detailed odor mitigation plan prepared by a licensed professional, usually an industrial hygienist or certified engineer, with their building permit application to ensure that no cannabis odors are detectable outside of the building. In addition, the facility will employ a number of sustainability features to reduce both its energy and water demand, particularly in the cultivation part of the business. And this will include the use of a water capture, recycling, and water filtration system, an automated drip irrigation system, and special LED grow lights. Finally, MHOSA states a desire to be a good neighbor and proposes a number of community benefits as part of their business plan and operations summary. This includes a preference for local hiring of Hayward residents, partnerships with nonprofits, including substance abuse prevention programs, and regular contributions and donations towards neighborhood and community improvements. I'll also mention here that to date, staff has received no comments or questions from members of the public on this application at the site. And further, per the police department, across the city's industrial area, there's only been one call for service to an existing legally operating cannabis facility in Hayward, and that was related to a vehicle accident on site. So this just helps to demonstrate that cannabis businesses, such as the proposed facility, are able to successfully operate in the city while still being good neighbors and community members. As detailed in the staff report and findings for this item, the application is consistent with the requirements, goals, and policies of the general plan. And this includes supporting the plan's goals and policies around attracting emergent sectors, supporting entrepreneurship, generating revenue for the city through the city's 7% cannabis tax, and providing job opportunities in a growing field. So with that, staff's recommendation this evening is that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit and administrative use permit for the proposed cannabis facility to allow cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution activities based on the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval. This formally concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have. In addition, if the chair will allow, the applicant has also prepared a short presentation that they would like to give before we start the question and answer period.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, the applicant wants to give a short presentation. Please do. Alberto, is that you? Mr. Giannacini, I hope I was pronouncing your name correctly.
Yes, thank you very much. So MHOSA is an entity that was created to specifically do cannabis cultivation. The site location's been a building that's been in my family for over 30 years. We've operated a cabinet shop out of it for the last 30 years, and due to the economy, looked at a change in use for highest and best use and an opportunity to grow sales and revenue and contributions to the city. We could go to the next slide. MHOSA is committed to providing safe access to adult cannabis products to our legal consumers. We believe that we set a higher standard for the industry based on our integrity and how we do business and how we treat employees. We've been operating businesses within Hayward, not just at that site, but at other sites for the last 30 years. And my partners have been in the cannabis industry for over 20 years. So we feel that we're very qualified to perform this activity and be socially responsible with our neighbors. I also, there may not have been any comments because I took a pamphlet and went to all of my neighbors, which I'm familiar with, and spoke to them at length, some of them up to an hour, to answer and field any questions that they may have, give them my contact information directly, and afford them any opportunity to reach out and ask questions prior to this meeting. Next slide. A little bit about my background. I'm a Castro Valley, I'm Oakland born, Castro Valley native. I've lived in Castro Valley for 48 years. I have a background in real estate and commercial operation. I'm a licensed real estate broker, and I work in high-end controlled environments for biotech, pharma, labs, offices. The last site I was at was $1 billion asset that we managed. It was over 2 million square feet. I've worked in FDA audits with Johnson & Johnson, along with EU audits. So I'm familiar with the pharmaceutical industry and the regulations, which is where this industry is going. I've managed billion-dollar assets, and I'm a subject matter expert in HVAC design and construction. Next slide. Brandon Levine is our subject matter expert when it comes to cannabis. He's had 20 years in the cannabis industry. He owns 3 retail dispensaries in the Santa Rosa Cotati area, along with 1 fully functioning cannabis cultivation site and 2 more that are currently under construction with permits already approved. So with our team being as robust as it is, we believe that we can be successful in Hayward. Next slide. As Elizabeth had pointed out, we have over 70 cameras placed in every room within the facility that'll be monitored 24/7 according to state guidelines and city guidelines. We have remote access for the Hayward PD so that they can view footage at any given time. The site is secure. It's at the end of a court, which only provides one way in, one way out. It's a concrete tilt-up construction, which provides additional security. Interior rooms are going to be cold room storage panels. So again, that offers additional security. And then our vaults are lined with security measures that are consistent with FDA, DEA guidelines for housing controlled substances. Next slide. Odor. So because we are subject matter experts in managing HVAC in controlled environments, we will be using high-end HVAC carbon filtration for the air that will be pulled out of every room and the corridors to eliminate any discharge of odors that will be able to be discharged into the atmosphere and smelt by local neighbors. Furthermore, we use a combination of technology to get discharge velocities to throw the air high enough so that even if there is a leak or a smell, that we use the dilution method to prevent anyone from smelling at any of our neighbors. Rooms are all designed to be airtight with minimal outside air going into them. And we have high-end controls for our HVAC and our lighting to manage the operation of the facility. Next slide. So as far as neighborhood compatibility, we believe we are compliant with industrial zoning. We have neighbors that are very aware of who we are as a company and as a people, and have voiced significant support. There is already an existing approved cannabis facility in the neighborhood, actually, with just outside of the 300-foot marker. And they have an on-site security guard, which we've become friends with, and they actually monitor the whole kind of like cul-de-sac, if you will, or court. And we have an increased security presence with our camera monitoring to deter any neighborhood intrusions to our facility. Next slide. Our education outreach, Mihosa, Joe Polyak, I'm not sure if he's available on the call to present this portion. Is he there? I'll present. So Mihosa and its management team is committed to combating and preventing youth and adult substance abuse in the city of Hayward throughout the development of actionable measures to be enforced during all stages of commercial cannabis operation. Mihosa is committed to the mitigation of substance abuse in the city beyond the store. Mihosa has reached out to several existing local substance abuse treatment centers and education organizations to discuss partnerships and community involvement. Next slide. Community benefit. We believe that we have a unique opportunity to become a major employer in Hayward and with disciplines and different skill levels, from very basic skill levels to very high end. And that affords individuals that are of the age 21 with clean legal background checks that have been approved to be able to operate our facility and build a career. Next slide. Thank you. And if there's any questions.
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute there for a second. Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. With that, we can move on to commissioner questions for staff or the applicant. And I see a couple hands already, so let's just go in the order that they pop up. That's fine with me. So Julie, Commissioner Roche.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Elizabeth and Mr. Giannacini, right? I think that's how you say your last name. I just had a couple of questions. One question I had is, I know that, you cultivate to distribute to dispensaries, but is there anything you do or can do to affect the way the products are displayed for, to keep them away from teens, because I know some of the early products we saw had kind of cutesy names and made it like colorful and bubbly to be attractive to kids, and just wondering what you see in the industry and how we can avoid that going forward.
Yeah, our business model has been to just cultivate and then to bulk distribute flower to different retail users or distribution companies that will do their own packaging. So we really don't have any input on the packaging that they use. It's strictly sourcing the flower for either use in pre-rolls or in actual flower sales or in sales to companies that will do extraction. But as far as your question goes, we won't have any influence on that market and how that's distributed. Our influence is just working with end users that plan to properly go through the retail chains and sell legally through approved legal dispensaries, and that's about the extent that we can do to contribute to the community of responsible use.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And then my other question is, you have, everything you talk about with hiring diversity is great. But I'm wondering if you've also considered, you talked about people with clean legal backgrounds, but, this is an industry that's great for rehabilitating formerly incarcerated, especially because they've been affected by the previous more restrictive laws when it comes to cannabis. So have you thought about and have you looked into how you might try to incorporate people who have been formerly incarcerated in the past?
We can definitely look into that, but I believe that there's state and local guidelines that require a background check and a clean criminal record to be able to operate in the industry. So we will follow whatever state guidelines apply, and we are an equal opportunity employer. We believe that everyone has an opportunity to reinvent themselves, and we definitely have a different type of culture. Our culture is why we do what we do. We do it because we love the product. We love to be able to help people. I have a number of family members that suffer from chronic pain that would rather use cannabis than opioids for their pain management. And so for me to be able to contribute a top-notch quality product assures them that they are consuming something that's healthy, that's of high quality and sustainable, and then is effective in managing their pain.
Okay.
I'll just add to that quickly, if you don't mind, Commissioner Roche. As part of our updated cannabis regulations, the city actually had a lot of internal conversations about that, exactly trying to balance the police department's concern about making sure we have good actors, in these businesses with access to these controlled substances, while also acknowledging that, things that were illegal 10 years ago are not illegal anymore, and trying not to penalize people for that. So there are some limitations from our police department as to, depending on the background check, what sort of previous crimes they, will allow people to have and still work in these facilities and what they won't. And that's probably going to continue to be an evolving conversation with city staff.
Thank you for adding that. And then Elizabeth, I just have one more question about solar on the roof. Was that a discussion, or is that not a requirement for this building because it's been there, or is there going to be solar incorporated?
That is not a requirement for this building. This is an existing building. So they're just proposing tenant improvements on the inside, moving some walls around and things like that. The new building code for solar requirements, and again, I'm not an expert in this, I believe is a lot more stringent for residential development than it is for other types of development. But again, this would apply to new development. So this is an existing building, so it would not apply here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Chair. That's all I had.
Thanks, Commissioner Roche. Just really quickly, I wanted to ask a follow-up question on Commissioner Roche's point on background checks, since that's really the only question I had to bring up in my conversation. So I appreciate that. Can you, Elizabeth, can you share a little bit more about the requirements the city puts? If I heard you correctly, you said that they require that somebody does not hire, like that this cannabis producer cannot hire certain people. That's what the city's puts requirements in. And I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and Jeremy is definitely the expert on this. So Jeremy, please correct me if I say anything that's incorrect. But any cannabis operator, not just the top people that are applying for these applications, but also people that work in these facilities are subject to background checks from the city's police department. And in these background checks, the police department has some discretion as to, doesn't necessarily need to be 100% clean record, but what types of former infractions that, they will allow someone to still work in the facility, and some things that they potentially will not allow. Jeremy might know off the top of his head better than I do what specifically is on which list. But as I said, I was part of some of the conversations around updating the cannabis regulations. We had a lot of conversations, staff had a lot of conversations with the police department around this. And I would say just, keep in mind, they're dealing with a ton of illegal grow operations and a lot of fraud and other, problems in the illegal part of our cannabis industry. So I think they're just trying to toe the line of making sure that people that are working and are legally operating businesses, maybe don't have totally clean records, but are people that we don't have concerns about having access to these sort of products. Jeremy?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I think you pretty much summarized a lot of the cannabis updates. And many of you on the commission may recall when we were having these community conversations last spring before we brought our finalized document for recommendation and adoption in July. We had a lot of conversations about what would qualify or disqualify an operator or an employee from being able to obtain a license. And what we tried to do is really align our guidance along with the state's guidance, so that we were creating opportunities where we loosen some of the protocols. So, for example, the previous ordinance did not allow, if you had any sort of possession offense, that is not an automatic disqualifier anymore. And additionally, we've added language in our code that if an individual, or including employees, have demonstrated a rehabilitation as part of their work, then that would be something that would also be taken into consideration. So I do think that, in an effort to kind of recognize that there is opportunities, and we want to encourage those that maybe have been criminalized and marginalized in the past, to provide them a pathway for employment. We've tried to align our guidance based on state and feedback from Hayward Police Department.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Elizabeth, thank you so much, both of you. All right, Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of quick questions for both the applicant and for city staff. I'll start with the applicant, if I may. Pardon my lack of knowledge in the space. Can you explain to me what is meant by extraction? Because it said there's no extraction taking place. I assume this has to do with oils, but it sounds like there's production going on. So I wasn't clear what is not being done and what is meant by extraction.
So extraction, there are different methods. There are butane extraction, where they use chemicals that are highly flammable to extract. And then there's also liquid CO2 or liquid. So it's basically a non-volatile. There's volatile and non-volatile extraction. That is a completely separate process. We don't have space in the facility to do that, and we don't have a desire to do that. It's a commodities market. So it's not what we like to stay in our lane and focus on what we're good at, and that's cannabis cultivation. The reason that we're retaining the manufacturing component is so that we can take oils that have been extracted by a different company and infuse them into pre-rolled joints to create a different product. And in order to do that, we have to have a manufacturing license. So all we're going to be doing is taking oil, lining the cannabis pre-roll to give it more potency, or giving it a different terpene profile, or different, profile in its effectiveness or its efficacy rate, and then packaging that and then sending that off to other distributors or into dispensaries.
So in effect, the value proposition here for us is that the site is not going to have this chemical process taking place. That's
no chemical process, no volatile or non-volatile extraction. It's very expensive, and it's just not something that we're interested in pursuing.
Makes sense. Let's see, hours of operation. I was a little confused because it says there are hours of operation, standard hours. However, it also the application referred to 24 hours a day, some operations that might include a human. And so what would the after hours operations look like, if any?
If we were having problems with HVAC and we wanted to have somebody on site to watch it, what typically happens is that with our trying to manage our facility, we need to do work when the lights are on. So lights are on for 12-hour period. And then we also roll that time period starting off early in the morning to take advantage of PG&E rollback or rates in the off-peak hours. So our staff will be there tending to the plants from about 8 a.m. until about 5 p.m. and then they leave. And so it's going to be rare. So we put it in there that we could have 24/7 as a kind of as a placeholder. But for us, we want our employees to have a good work-life balance. We've already have established cannabis cultivation sites that operate within those hours just fine. But sometimes if it's a very volatile product, so we need to have maybe somebody babysitting it a little bit longer. If there's a piece of equipment that's a little bit glitchy, there may be people on site to manage that process.
I'll just quickly add here, if you don't mind, Commissioner Ollie Sullivan, this is similar to other industrial businesses that have like third shift that operate around the clock. There's no retail component here. So importantly, and state law limits this, there's not people like customers coming and going from the site.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Applicant, appreciate the fact that this building has been in your family for a very long time. Didn't realize that as I was initially looking at the application, which I think is great that you're finding a new use for it. As part of that new use, are you planning on any exterior visual improvements of the building? It's not the prettiest area. I get that. It's maybe not the prettiest building. I understand that there's a tension between not wanting to draw too much attention, but are there any improvements planned for the exterior of the building? Honestly,
other than a coat of paint, when that becomes applicable for maintenance, we would like to keep that low profile. Right now, we're kind of off the radar, if you will. We're at the end of a court. You have to drive into the actual parking lot to see what we're doing. And so there's really not a lot of traffic on that street to begin with. Most of the businesses are service industry businesses that have parts or materials that ship in or ship out. So you have just really delivery trucks. There's not a lot of clientele that come in and out, like, just off the street. There's no foot traffic. There is bus, availability on Cabot Boulevard for our employees to be able to bus in. But other than that, there's no street parking, no sidewalks. It's really, we want to just stay low under the radar and not have anybody look at it. The only way they will be able to tell that it's a grow is that we're going to have an extensive amount of cameras. That's the telltale sign. Okay. And then the last question for you and Commissioner Roche, you raised a really great point there on the solar question, which I hadn't thought of. Even if it's not required, I would think based on the energy needs of a facility like this, it would almost be in the applicant's interest to utilize solar energy. Is that something that you are thinking about doing or you plan to use? We have an energy management company that's reviewing our lights, our HVAC, and they are looking at solar load. If that's something that has a good ROI, then it's something that we'll definitely look at. We need to establish the business and the operation and become profitable so that we can afford an infrastructure improvement such as that. The current infrastructure bill just to run the facility is already at a high dollar value. So once we start to generate revenue and profits, then we can look at upgrading. We are moving towards a carbon-free footprint. So we are not using boilers that are, gas-fired boilers to reheat water. What the equipment that we're using is simple refrigeration. And if we do go to a larger component, it will be a heat recovery chiller. So it's all electric. So the heat that it rejects from the chilled water that it makes is also used to heat the air. Okay. Appreciate that. The last question, and thank you, Chair, for humoring me on a couple of these questions here. Last question for Elizabeth. The conditions of approval, I didn't notice, and I guess my question to you is there a way to put in a requirement that would require or hold the developer to actually starting these operations within a set amount of time? And what I'm getting at is sort of alluded to in one of the questions that fellow commissioner raised, I guess, on the additional comments. We've seen a variety of these applications come to us, and yet as I drive around those sites, I haven't seen any
movement. It doesn't appear to be any movement on a lot of these other cannabis projects. Is there a way to create a condition of approval that would require the applicant to actually start construction, if you will, within a set amount of time to ensure that this actually does happen if it is approved?
There's some things in the municipal code per all use permits that say that, you need to start operations within 3 years. There's some language in the conditions of approval related to pulling business or building permits. There's timelines with building permits where you have to kind of have move-in on them every 6 months. I'd say the thing that's uniquely difficult about cannabis businesses, and Alberto can certainly speak to this as well, is there's the whole state licensing process. I know a couple of other cannabis businesses that I've helped shepherd through the entitlement process are held up in the building permit phase, not because of anything with their building permit, but because they're waiting on that final approval from the state, and the state is backed up several months, in some cases 6 months or longer to getting those approvals in. So for that reason, there are standard timelines that kind of help ensure that these use permits have to get built within at least a few years timeline. But in terms of instituting anything more strenuous than that, I don't necessarily think that's going to help get these things operational, because these businesses want to be operational. They want to be profitable. They're already spending money on all these tenant improvement. It's just cannabis is a time consuming process.
Got it. Chair Kennedy, that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Sullivan. Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you also for the presentations. I wanted to start by asking, the security plan, page 12, states that if loading or unloading of cannabis must occur away from the normal loading dock, then security will transport. But then in another part, it talked about how it was set up so that the trucks would go right sort of into the facility so that no one on the outside would know that there was anything being transported. So does this statement on page 12 mean that sometimes there will be situations where they will be loaded or unloaded in another place that's maybe more visible?
So to answer that question, this actually came up early in the approval process. And what we did was we pulled the exact language and verbiage from the state regulations and used that state regulation language and inserted it into the application so that we were compliant in any and all methods of operation. And that's why there may appear to be a conflict, but it's actually not. It's that the state has those guidelines, and our intent is to follow those guidelines to the letter.
And I'll just add here, Commissioner Lowe, there is a condition of approval related exactly to this, that all loading and unloading must occur within the enclosed building. So even though the state's a little bit more permissible depending on different operations, for this business, especially since they have the ability to, our police department definitely prefers that the loading and unloading happen within the secured building.
That's what was confusing, because I saw that as a condition, but then I saw the other part, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and just for normal business operation, it's in our best interest to do everything we're doing in a secure area that is closed off, that people cannot see what we're doing. And our deliveries and our pickups are randomized so as to not allow a criminal element to case the facility and be able to strike with known regularity of deliveries or pickups. So we want to mask everything that we can mask.
Thank you. The security plan said that 2 employees will open the business and close the business. Does one of those employees necessarily be the security, or will they just be 2 employees?
It'll likely be 2 employees in case that we have our scheduled security guard who's going to be there at a scheduled time. If there's a reason that we need to go in and open up early, then it would not be, the security guard wouldn't have known or been able to have responded. If we get an alarm, if we have a problem within the facility with the operation, could be HVAC, could be lighting, could be a water leak. Those are out of the ordinary exceptions that we would not have security there, but we would still have 2 individuals responding. for safety.
So when you open up and when you close, security won't necessarily be there.
It's not part of the protocol that we have lined up currently. We weren't aware that that was a requirement. I think it's important to note that, as Elizabeth had pointed out, there's only been one call to service, and it was unrelated to an incident within the cannabis. So that doesn't mean that we will never have that, but the way that operations are run, and Brandon could speak to it if he was presenting, the sites are pretty secure. They're pretty low key. If there's going to be an event, it's going to be in after hours when there's nobody there. And that's where we have the 24/7 monitoring of our security cameras by either an individual that's on site or remote monitoring company.
And just to add to that, per state law, as well as city regulations, during business hours, stated business hours, there will be a security guard present. So as Alberto said, it would just be in these instances where an alarm was set off, there's an alarm of a water leak or something kind of out of the ordinary. Generally speaking, during business hours, a security guard is required to be there, not only by our city ordinances, but by state legislation as well.
And is it only one that's required to be there?
Yes.
Going to the salaries and also the part where you talk about the preference for Hayward residents, because I noticed in the plan it says, well, we prefer Hayward residents, but we also want to bring in people from the outside and their expertise as well. And then when I look at the structure of the company, it looks like a lot of the upper management positions are already in place. And so my question is, and you'll know my concern when I ask my question is, what is the highest level of management that someone who's a Hayward resident could actually aspire to in this company? How low or high is that ceiling?
So the founders are going to hold the C-suite executive positions, which I think is appropriate for the investment and the control of the asset or the control of the entity. Up into the C-suite is basically at the C-suite and above is going to be people who have equity interest in the company, and then that would leave salaried employees or hourly employees to be able to fill any position below that C-suite.
And the hourly employees, I believe, if I remember correctly, they make around $16 an hour. Is that right?
I don't believe we stated any salary or any wage. That's the minimum wage. I can tell you that a cultivator average income is about $20 an hour, as high as $25. A lead cultivator is about $30 an hour. These are not high skilled positions. We have to basically take somebody, train them from scratch, brand new, teach them our processes, teach them how to do it, and then it becomes an assembly line, almost like building cars. It's rinse and repeat. Everything is consistent. It's a turnover of rooms every 8 to 10 weeks. So it allows us to use a lower skilled labor pool, which affords more people the opportunity, which affords more Hayward residents to be able to qualify and bring in. And then there are some special skilled positions, such as lead cultivator, that is, someone who's been in the industry 20 years, 25 years. Those QA positions are going to be held by people who have industry experience in the pharmaceutical industry or in the cannabis industry. And I don't know that there's really a lot of Hayward residents that may fit or may not fit in that category. We will definitely give Hayward residents the priority. For us, that works out better because they have less commute time. They can have better control of their costs to get to work for commuting, fuel, vehicles, and then they can also take advantage of the public transportation system. So it can give people that have no vehicles an opportunity to be an employee and have a job and be able to reliably get to work.
Approximately how many employees do you expect to hire?
We expect at full capacity about 25 to 30 employees.
And this is a question, I think, for staff. And thank you for answering those questions. I appreciate it. This is a question for staff. I noticed that it said, and I can't remember if it was just a denial of renewal of an application or revocation, but somewhere in there it talked about how excessive calls for service could result. And I wanted to find out what constitutes excessive calls for service.
That's a good question. That is a standard condition of approval in any of our for any of our cannabis businesses. It essentially says because we have this annual licensing process where annually there's going to be a review of the business where our code enforcement team, fire team, police will go out and inspect the business, make sure it's operating as conditioned and as was approved originally. If that is not happening and or if the police department is finding that they're having multiple calls for service, maybe not this one business that had a vehicle accident on site, something like that is not going to have their permit be revoked, but something where there's just, activity that's creating an unsafe environment in our industrial area, the city has the right to revoke the permit. We do not need to renew the permit. We can revoke the use permit, and then the operator would not be allowed to operate anymore in the city. The code does not specify like how many calls for service that is. That's something the police department would determine. It might be a number of calls. It might be the severity of calls depending on what's going on. But basically, if it's becoming a burden on our city services, on police services to support this, if it's becoming unsafe for the employees of this business, for surrounding businesses, that would be a reason that the city would look into revoking a permit.
If I could just add on to what Elizabeth pointed out, Commissioner, is that one of the things that it's not really clearly stated in our ordinance, but in terms of a process revocation, there would be a public hearing that would be required. So it's not that the city just arbitrarily yanks somebody's ability to operate. If a use permit has been issued, then and the city council has issued that permit, then there is a process, a due process that is afforded the applicant. And at that point, there would be substantial evidence presented that could support that action. So again, it's not as arbitrary as it sounds. I think there is a due process that all applicants, in order to ensure that they are given a fair representation and to be able to state their case as well.
Thank you very much for answering my questions. That's all I have, Chair.
Commissioner Goldstein, you raised your hand earlier. Did you have any questions, or are you good?
Well, I wasn't going to, because my colleagues on this panel have thoroughly asked all of the questions that I had in mind but one. So I might as well ask it. What is the impact, do you feel, of taxes on the business outlook? So the reason I'm asking that, of course, anyone that's following the topic, apparently the rate of taxation from state and local government on cannabis activities is still making it very lucrative for illegal cannabis operators. And that is undermining the business and profitability in this industry. But I'd like to hear from the applicant what his feelings are on the tax issue.
Oh boy, that's a very hot topic button. I believe that the government has continued the war on drugs with the legal cannabis market. The IRS 280E taxation rule does not allow us to claim a lot of deductions that a standard business is able to deduct. And what that's doing is really causing double taxation. It's driving our profit margins, treating an industry that has been deemed legal now, and it's still treating and punishing it as an illegal entity or an illegal kind of industry. We as the cannabis industry should be afforded the same equal rights as a mechanic shop or a CPA or an attorney at law. It's based on income generated. There's very standardized deductions that are applied. And until we see 280E revoked and normalization of taxation, the legal cannabis industry is going to be in dire straits. There have been recent articles that have been posted throughout the state talking about lots of companies that are failing, companies that have carried debt with their constructability are not able to carry the debt, pay the expenses, and then pay the taxes on top of it. And then with city taxation also being high. If you look at a 7% taxation, it's really pulling like 24, 25% of the profit margin because of the taxation code restrictions that don't even allow us to deduct the money that we're paying to the city in the city tax. So if you can't deduct taxes that you're already paying and you're paying taxes upon taxes, it's really like double and triple taxation. And until people are willing to recognize the value of the cannabis industry to the local economy and support us as a business, as other businesses are supported, the cannabis industry will continue to struggle and may fail. This is a unique opportunity because I own the property. We've owned it for 30 years. Our cost of ownership and cost of rent is really down, so I can convert that into profitability. But without the city's help of reevaluating what their true impact of the business is based on their percentage of taxation, it's kind of like an arbitrary. It's an arbitrary thing. It's like it's people trying to pull all the eggs out of the goose before the goose is ready to lay them, and it will kill the goose. I believe that if this is continued, that it will kill the industry. There is still money to be made, but it is not as lucrative as people think. People think cannabis is like driving Lamborghinis and Ferraris around, and for us, that's not our why, and that's not what we're trying to do. In our internal organization structure, we have key participants and we have bonus structures. We want people that are doing this because they love it. I've had the opportunity to work in Brandon's cannabis cultivation site in Santa Rosa, and the people there have families, and they have left like the wine industry because they were being treated poorly, and they jump into a cannabis company and they're treated like family. They're good family, not bad family. But they're doing something they love. They do something that they're proud of, that they share. They can go and tell their friends that they're making an impact, and they make it an honest, decent living. So that's really why we're doing this. I'm doing this to create a use because I did try and lease that building, and with COVID and with the economy crashing, it was hard to find anybody that was willing to take on that size of a building. So I linked up with Joe and Mihosa. They had the permit, and I became a partner and an equity interest, and we're trying to do something that will bring value and money to the city. But we need the city to also reevaluate their taxation plan to help us remain in business. It's sustainability. Just as we want sustainability for environmental concerns, there has to be sustainability concerns for businesses and just operation. And we're happy to open the books to show, what we're doing. And so that would be, when you talk about that, I would just implore you to, as you're reevaluating your structure for cannabis, to really start to treat us like a normal business would be treated, and to understand the extenuating circumstances around 280E and how the city applies their taxation.
Very good. One more question. And by the way, that was very thoughtful, well-reasoned statement that you gave on the issue of taxation. So I appreciate that. And it was clear to me from the beginning that your ownership of the building would in many ways insulate you from those kinds of troubles. So that part's good. In the area of solar, the only part of the equation that I didn't hear discussed so far is your business operations. When you get to a point where you're making 30 plus million revenue annually, while we've had no long-term power outages yet, it's clear to me that your business would be potentially massively disrupted if you had any kind of long-term power outage. Is that true?
So in our phasing plan, we do have on the site plan a location to house two 1 megawatt generators to give us backup power if that's needed. That's standby power, and we can dim the lights, we can dim, which will reduce the HVAC load to be able to manage sustainability so that we don't lose product. That's business continuity. That's the best plan that we can have for business continuity. The solar that we would be able to put on that roof would not be able to substantiate carrying the load of the building. We need about 3,000 amps of 480 volt power, which all the photovoltaic panels are operating at around the 120 volt range. So all of our HVAC equipment, our lights, they're all at 480. So that would be something to try and get the meter to spin backwards. but not applicable in the actual transfer of power from the solar panels to the actual equipment within the space.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. Part of the reason why that comes up as a question is in my role in emergency communications, it comes up a lot that in major disasters, power outages can last actually for a couple of months, even in a industrial equipped area such as you're having. So if we ever had a major disaster, your business would likely be impacted, and the ability even to deliver fuel to power generators could be problematic. So I don't know, maybe down the road, solar will be more powerful and suitable for the type of operation that you have, but I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, with no further hands raised, we're going to jump into public comment on this item. And we can turn it over to Ms. Chan. I know there was one hand raised, two now. Can we get them into speaking, please?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. Brandon Levine, is he part of the applicant's team?
Yes.
Okay. I tried promoting him to, I'll allow him to speak first. Let's go with that. All right. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you're dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand on the phone and use *6 to unmute yourself when called to speak. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your audio will be disabled. All right, so I am going to call on Brandon Levine. Brandon, please unmute yourself.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Brandon, go ahead.
Hi. Sorry. How can I help you?
Oh, Brandon, your hand was raised, so didn't know if you wanted to say something briefly about your role, but...
No, I had done, I was a part of Alberto's project, and I was going to help him answer one of the questions that he already did a pretty good job of. I think I did that like halfway through the presentation.
Okay. Well, then you can mute yourself, Brandon, if you would mute yourself, please. Thank you. All right. I'm going to call on Kim Huggett. Kim, if you could unmute yourself. Go ahead, Kim.
Great. Good evening, Commissioners. This is Kim Huggett, President and CEO of the Hayward Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank Dan Goldstein for giving the opportunity to give kind of a Chamber of Commerce lesson tonight. Hayward sales tax, 7.5%. Cannabis state excise tax, 15. The cultivation tax is $10. The Hayward cannabis tax is 7 to 14%. So you're talking about 40+% tax on a cannabis item. No wonder the black market is thriving. So until cannabis businesses can get a fair shake from a state that seems to think that they're going to be the source of gold dust and diamonds, we're going to have trouble getting these companies off the ground and running, which is why we've had so many cannabis companies in Hayward 4 years later still trying to get going. We got on board with MIHOSA back in 2018 because of the professionalism in the industry, with their expertise in staff training and quality control, safety and security. And we're working with company representatives like Joe Poliak to help them even meet some of their nearby businesses. I think one of the things that impressed us, in addition to the business plan, the professionalism, the high ethical standards, was their commitment to community service. They've been a significant supporter of the South Hayward Parish and helping with food issues in our community. And they also underwrote membership costs for a number of charitable organizations in the Hayward Nonprofit Alliance, which has been critical, especially in the dark days of the pandemic when nonprofits were struggling to stay alive and get people to continue to make sacrificial giving. So tonight, I just urge you to approve the conditional use permit on a company that we're going to be proud to have here in Hayward. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. If you could mute yourself, please. Chair, I do not see anybody else who have raised their hands.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chan. We will close the public comment section for this item, and I will ask if the city staff has any other questions or things they want to address from that's come up. And if not,
nothing further.
Okay, just checking. And if not, we can now move into commissioner deliberations. Commissioner Roche, jump on in.
I'm sorry. I think I'm just quick on the draw this evening. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to just, in this comment period, I wanted to thank the applicant for the thoughtfulness and the way that they sought out to be a good community partner, and the way they did look into all of our nonprofits and see where the need was, and give support where they could. I think this is a good location for this use. I appreciate the intent to be low profile, both for the safety of your employees and for the safety of the neighborhood. So I think we can make the finding to approve this use. And I'd be happy to move the item, but I'm happy to wait for everybody else's comments first. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonilla, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well. And congratulations on being chair. Commissioner Roche, did you you didn't make a motion, did you?
No, I'll go ahead and wait. Thank you.
I was hoping to second the motion that I was hoping you were going to make. I'm
happy to make it if we want to go that way, but
I'm open to accepting a motion right now, just if we'd like, and we can continue with deliberations. It's fine.
Sure. If you don't mind, Commissioner Bonilla, then I'll go ahead and make the motion. All right, then I move that we accept the staff recommendation.
I second.
Thank you.
Great. So we have a motion on the floor, and we can continue deliberations and then vote.
So I second your motion, Commissioner Roche. I do also agree with a lot of the comments that you had made. I appreciate the community benefit plan that's a part of this applicant's proposal. I think it's very comprehensive, and I appreciate Mr. Huggett's comments as well about the applicant's involvement in the community. We need more businesses as involved as this one's going to be and has been. I also appreciate the extensive community outreach, which is probably why we didn't hear anything from the public today that was in opposition to this particular applicant. So I, too, fully support this application. Thank you.
And just real quick, I just want to make sure Ms. Chan got that we have a motion that was made by Commissioner Roche and seconded by Commissioner Bonilla to approve staff recommendations on the item.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Just wanted to double check. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. So I've had the opportunity to serve on this commission now for 3 years, and it seems to me that I've heard a lot of cannabis CUP applications. In fact, I've heard more cannabis CUP applications than, I don't know, maybe a microprocessor assembly plant or a biotechnology facility or anything that's, I would argue, a very next generation technology or manufacturing facility. So I got to thinking, how does Hayward compare to other cities in terms of cannabis licensing? So I went on the state's database and I did a little research. And of course, it's difficult because it doesn't break it down per city because the data is not completely consistent. But what I did find out is on a per county basis, it's actually pretty reasonable. And in Alameda County, there appears to be 77 cannabis licensed facilities per million people, as compared to only in Santa Clara County, 4 per million people. So my only point to make here is I would like to see the industrial sections of Hayward be filled with wonderful businesses of the future. And just as the applicant had mentioned that his business, his building, he could not get a tenant for it, I think that's really unfortunate, because when I look in the biotech sectors of Marin and the high-tech centers of Santa Clara County, there is no space for rent. So thank you.
Thank you to Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Ollie Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, overall, no concerns with the project. I would have liked to see, as I was looking over the documentation, I was expecting some really nice images and pictures of what the proposed new building was going to look like. And one of the concerns that I had was a lack of any type of exterior improvements or any type of visual improvements. But in talking to the applicant, I understand sort of the tension that they face in not wanting to attract that additional attention to the building, and also recognizing that this isn't going to be a facility where end users are coming, or where consumers. It's B2B, not B2C. Obviously, as we approve or look to approve projects in the city, I'd like to see the visual and built environment of our city improve as well. And so it is challenging when you don't necessarily see that with the project, but I understand some of the reasoning behind it. Another concern, though, that I wanted to raise, and this is really for city staff, and I don't know how my fellow commissioners may or may not feel on this, but in the staff report, as part of the findings that have to be made, in attachment 2, finding number 4, the proposed use is in harmony with applicable city policies and the intent and purpose of zoning district involved. And there are basically three components of the municipal code that are being cited as applicable to this project. And while I understand the last two, so economic development policy and economic development goal, right? Attracting businesses, okay, fine. Cultivating entrepreneurship, okay, fine, it makes sense. I understand that. The first use that's being cited, so approving uses that attract the creative class. I really struggle with this because I don't understand how this use is attractive to the creative class. And if we are making that assessment, then the conclusion there is that in order to attract the creative class, you need to have types of uses like cannabis. And so, while I don't think you need all three uses, I understand that the economic development component of it satisfies the need. I do struggle with and don't necessarily agree that this use meets a requirement for attractive to creative classes and encouraging amenities and uses to attract creative class professionals and businesses to Hayward. Bit of my soapbox there, but just a thought that I wanted to raise for city staff. Not really agreeing with that. On the taxation piece, we also need to recognize that there's federal and there's state taxation laws, and California might have approved cannabis, but there's still federal laws in place here that create complexity from a compliance and taxation standpoint. And so while it is difficult for the business community, and I understand that, it's also not surprising, and it's something that I would assume that the applicant has built into his business plan, recognizing that uncertainty on the federal side of the taxation regulatory issue. Outside of that, no other real comments. Oh, pardon me. Last thing I wanted to say, similar to what other commissioners have raised, it's sort of become a joke now with my friends at planning commission meetings that we have another cannabis facility in Hayward, right? Another cannabis facility. This is by far the highest use that I've seen of projects come over my year and change on the commission. I think there've been about 4 projects. But again, the lack of any type of advancement, the lack of any type of physical on the ground development that I'm seeing is really challenging and frustrating, because we approve projects on the assumption that that when they're approved, you'll see development, you'll see progress. And that lack of progress is really challenging. I hope that this applicant, if this project is approved, doesn't face that same type of challenge. Recognize that there's complexity at the state level, but again, it is something that is disappointing that we're not able to see progress on some of these projects in a faster manner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Sullivan. Commissioner Bonilla, I'm so sorry. I think I've totally skipped over you when you were seconding that vote. Did you have any comments, deliberations you wanted to add?
No. Thank you, though. I do appreciate the fact that, we've seen a lot of these applicants, but that's just because they've been in the pipeline for a while, right? These things have been in the pipeline since 2019 and before. I mean, the city's been working to bring these projects to this stage for quite a while. And it's finally good to see these projects getting so far in the process, because it has been quite a bureaucratic process, and especially with the old process that's been put in place. So no other comments. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thanks. Commissioner Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. So my concerns were the two main concerns I had were, number one, I wanted to make sure with my questioning that the people who are hired, as much as we can, make sure that they are Hayward residents. I'm still a little concerned about upward mobility at this particular business for Hayward residents. And I hope that there will be a concerted effort to hire and promote Hayward residents, and especially, or even in these specialized fields of cultivation, maybe there are people in Hayward who would qualify for that. So I hope that that you will seek out Hayward residents, even for those more specialized jobs. And also diversity as it relates to hiring, I think is very important. And when I look at the upper management here, I'm not sure if there's diversity. I hope there is, but I hope that that's something that the applicant will make an effort to bring to this business. The second thing that I was concerned about is safety. I know about, I've read all of the things that the applicant plans to do to make sure that the business is safe, and I understand where the location is and all of those things, and making sure that the trucks don't have any signage and the building doesn't have any signage and all those things. But we certainly have all heard of people who target these businesses specifically, make it their business to find out where they are. And they certainly have looted cultivation, manufacturing, distribution centers for cannabis. So safety for the community is of real concern for me as it relates to this business. Although when I listened to the presentation and I read the materials, I do think that they are doing everything that they can to try to make sure it's safe. So a lot of the things that I was most worried about, I feel, and I hope will play out in a way such that there won't be any more calls for service, certainly not any excessive calls for service, and that Hayward residents will find jobs at this particular location. So I will support these permits.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's interesting that we seem to be going back to our roots as a cultivation community. In history, we used to grow flowers here in Hayward, not me personally. But I definitely understand Aiden's and others' growing concerns about cannabis seeming to, dominate the agenda. But I think, as others have said, that it's really just a matter of timing, that economically, I believe that a lot of companies that could be starting businesses are probably not doing that right now and haven't been due to COVID. And the ones that are contemplating businesses are not looking at establishing physical presence, but doing online. And so I think that maybe has a lot to do with the nature of the projects that we're seeing. And I certainly hope that as business rebounds, Hayward will get its fair share. And I think this is a good business. I worry about the taxation because even though this applicant is insulated somewhat by virtue of the fact that he owns the building and therefore doesn't have to pay rent, the fact is if he's a smart accountant, and I think he probably is, that his best and highest use calculations are going to figure in at some point. And maybe if in balance, what he can earn doing something else isn't keeping up with what he can earn in this cultivation business, that this cultivation business may wither. And please forgive me for all the puns. I can't help it. Honestly, they just tumble out of my mouth. But the fact is that I am in support of this project. I think the applicant and his team have done an outstanding job of considering all of the factors, and what they bring to Hayward, I think, is truly outstanding.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldstein. Yeah, I also have some quick comments before we move to a vote on the motion that's on the floor. I think the thing that jumps out to me that I'm willing to support this project, move it forward. It's not another dispensary. That would be a very big deal. We've kind of decided on a certain number. Well, not we. City Council has decided on a certain number of different cannabis licenses they want to provision in the city, and people applying, getting those licenses and giving them out. The only thing I think that is of most concern to me in this process that has been set underway is that we are getting a diverse group of owners and ownership into the space. California has not been as proactive as I'd like, and nor has the city, Hayward, on social equity programming. The funding is run out from the state level, and frankly, social equity programs are exactly like some of the commissioners said earlier, are what is needed to make sure that this legal area of cannabis, growing, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and retail, people had jobs that did this. They just got locked up for it. And now this is their career. And it's easy to see people, no offense to our applicant, making transitions from other, businesses to this space, and, still having incredible barriers for folks who are formerly incarcerated or impacted by previous convictions around cannabis and cannabis market, in the cannabis market. And so, one thing as a reentry attorney that I want to just leave here, something I focus a lot on, is access to employment and housing for people with conviction histories. I'm really disheartened. I know we've been a part of this conversation. We had the ordinance amendments come before us months ago, and we commented on them. I had very big concerns myself with the background check process. I know the state already has a pretty rigorous process that we are, basically controlling, or I would even say, encouraging people to deny folks with conviction histories is really upsetting and disheartening to me. I understand that the Hayward Police Department has an interest in trying to make sure that quote unquote bad actors are not getting into the legal business industry and then, flouting the laws and rules and regulations that we have. I wouldn't want to see that either. On the other hand, a great deal, a number of people, including people in my own family who have interest in getting into this field, are barred from it under the way that we are, running this process. And where does that leave people but to continue to operate outside of the legal industry? So, I just think it's worth considering the rules and barriers that we have. We need to make it possible for people who have been most directly impacted by, incarceration, prosecution, and for drug convictions to be a part of this growing and emerging industry. So I'm off my soapbox now. That's all I wanted to say. I appreciate your patience with me. With no more comments, I'd like to move on and ask Ms. Chan for a vote on the motion on the floor. Roll call vote, please. And that is a motion that was put forward by Julie and Commissioner Roche and seconded by Commissioner Bonilla to approve staff recommendation. If we could please get roll call.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lowe.
Aye.
I almost said Chair Roche. Commissioner Roche.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Okenda.
Yes.
Thank you. You have 7 ayes.
Thank you for that. The motion's carried 7-0. And with that, the first item is done. So let's move on to approval of the minutes.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Stevens, seconded by Commissioner Lowe to approve the minutes. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes they want to make at this time, or can we move forward on that? All right. We call for a vote on approval of the minutes, please, Ms. Chan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lowe.
Aye.
Commissioner Roche.
Aye.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Okenda.
Yes.
Thank you. 7 ayes.
Great. Motion carries. We passed the minutes. All right. Okay, guys. Now we're going to move on to commissioner reports and announcements. Anybody we got? We can go with staff first, please.
Yeah, good evening, commissioners. Welcome to the first meeting of the 2022. Hopefully everyone had a safe new year. A couple of quick reminders just for the commission. So many of you may know that next week we have our joint work session with the city council and this body to talk about our objective standards project that we will be bringing forward, as well as talking about and presenting an update on our density bonus ordinance that we're hoping to get feedback from you all on. That meeting will start at 7 o'clock on Zoom platform. You may have received the notice from the city clerk's office that agenda is available. And as well as the staff report. So anyway, that will start next Tuesday, February 1st at 7 o'clock. In addition to that, many of you may recall that the last joint work session, there was a pretty robust conversation about the housing element. And wanted to let everybody know that the housing element is the ways to get involved. There's plenty of opportunities if you want to get involved as a resident in the community. On February 23rd, there will be the first environmental justice meeting that's going to be held. It will be Zoom, also held on a Zoom platform. And information on that will be published on the city's website shortly before a week before the meeting takes place. The environmental justice meeting will start at 6:30 and go till around 8 o'clock. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up that if you have interest in that and you want to participate in that, we've heard there was a lot of interest in the commissioners to participate in that. And then the last one is related to a upcoming training opportunity. So the American Planning Association is having their National Planning Conference this year in San Diego, and we are opening it up that if any of the commissioners have any interest in participating, that we do have the option to pay for registration if you want to participate online. and virtually. The APA conference runs from April 30th to May 3rd. In addition, or alternately, if you do not want to participate in that, there is the League of California Cities Planning Commissioner Academy that is going to be running from March 16th to 18th, and that will be taking place in San Ramon, a little bit closer to home. So if any of you have any interest in that, if you want to shoot me an email, we'll make sure to get you registered for that, those opportunities, and gives you some additional training. There's if any of you, I think some of you participated in the last year's League of California Cities Academy, and it was, I've heard really good things, a lot of great opportunities to hear kind of what's going on with the latest and greatest land use and housing legislation throughout the state. And then the last just quick update is our next Planning Commission meeting, aside from the joint work session next Tuesday, will be on Thursday, February 10th. As of right now, we have 2 projects that are going to be under consideration. We have a precise plan line adjustment that is going for recommendation to City Council. And then we have the more significant Parcel Group 5 project, which is a plan development rezoning that is going to be presented to the Planning Commission, also with recommendation to Council. Aside from that, the second meeting in February, we are currently slated to bring forward our general plan annual report. And many of you may recall that we did do an informational report last year about the progress that we're making for implementing a lot of our general plan programs. So anyway, a lot going on. Hope everyone stays healthy, and thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, with that, we can move on to Commissioner announcements, and Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Yeah, quickly, Jeremy, on the meeting for Tuesday, just to clarify, and recognizing that our agenda item is a bit down the list, we'll be joining for the entire meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, perfect. All right, that was the only question I had. Great meeting. Thanks, everyone. And to our chair, congrats on a first successful meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate you. All right, Commissioner Roche.
Thanks, Chair Kunda. I just saw in my email because I thought it might be of interest to us. I saw that the Latino Business Roundtable is having a discussion tomorrow about the future of Mission Boulevard. It's through the chamber. It's at 9:00, and it's going to be somebody from the Alameda County Transportation Commission talking about the whole stretch of Mission Boulevard through Hayward. And I just thought as planners that might be something interesting to us. So I believe that'll be on the chamber's site. You can probably find the information there. And if anyone's interested, I can send it to you as well. So just wanted to say that. And great job, Chair Okenda.
Thank you. Learn from the best. Okay. Well, with nothing further, I think going once, going twice, we can adjourn the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, guys. Good to see you all.
Recording stopped.
Stay safe.